What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com. Here are my DFS picks for NFL Week 2. Monday Night Football. Doubleheader. These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our new videos. Okay guys, in this video, I'm going to give you my top DFS picks for this Monday Night Football Showdown. In the first game, we have the Buffalo Bills and the Tennessee Titans. And in the second game, we have the Minnesota Vikings and the Philadelphia Eagles. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, so in the first game between the Tennessee Titans and the Buffalo Bills, let's take a look at the quarterback position. So, of course, I like Josh Allen. He's expensive on this slate though. He's $12,600 DraftKings salary. Compare that to Ryan Tannehill at $9,200. So you'll have to make some sacrifices in your lineup to get in Josh Allen. But he is a good play here tonight from the Buffalo Bills playing the Tennessee Titans, who have the 9th worst defense overall. They're middle of the pack defending opposing quarterbacks. Josh Allen scored 34 fantasy points in week 1. He got 10 rush attempts in that game. He's going to be about 78% owned, projected at 26.3 fantasy points here tonight. So like I said, he's $12,600 DraftKings salary. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 48 points scored in this game, with the Bills favored by 10. So it is hard to play Ryan Tannehill over Josh Allen in this matchup. Ryan Tannehill, although he's only $9,200 DraftKings salary, that's still somewhat expensive, and he's got a tough matchup here. The Buffalo Bills are the 3rd best defense overall. They give up the 3rd fewest fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Now, Ryan Tannehill's going to be about 39% owned. He's projected at 15.4 fantasy points here tonight. He scored 19 fantasy points in week 1. So he does have that 20-plus fantasy point upside. And I think it would be a good idea to make a contrarian lineup with Ryan Tannehill. But between the two quarterbacks, I'm going to pay up for Josh Allen here versus the Tennessee Titans. Okay, let's take a look at the running back position. So of course you got the stud Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry is $11,000 DraftKings salary. Now he only scored 8 fantasy points in week 1 off of 21 rush attempts and 1 pass target. He's going to be about 52% owned, projected at 17.4 fantasy points here tonight. And he's got a tough matchup here versus the Buffalo Bills. So if you're going to play Josh Allen, going to be hard to fit Derrick Henry in there. So I like Derrick Henry. But if you want to save some salary at the running back position, take a look at the Buffalo Bills running backs. You have Devin Singletary and Zach Moss. Now, Devin Singletary, he scored 8 fantasy points in week 1 off of 8 rush attempts and 2 pass targets. Meanwhile, Zach Moss scored 9 fantasy points in week 1 off of 6 rush attempts and 6 pass targets. Now, there's a huge price difference between these two players. Devin Singletary is $7,400 DraftKings salary, whereas Zach Moss is only $3,600 DraftKings salary. So if you do want to play Josh Allen, I think you could look to Zach Moss, who got 12 touches compared to Devin Singletary's 10 touches in week 1 for a fraction of the price. He's going to be about 22% owned. Devin Singletary about 34% owned. But with the Buffalo Bills looking to lead this game by 10 points, there could be a lot of action for these running backs. So I like both of these guys. But in the effort of trying to save salary in your lineup, I like Zach Moss. And the Tennessee Titans give up the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing running backs. So I think playing one of these guys makes a ton of sense. but I do like Zach Moss because of the low price tag here versus the Tennessee Titans. Okay, let's take a look at the wide receiver position. The stud on the slate, Stephon Diggs from the Buffalo Bills. And the Tennessee Titans, they are middle of the pack defending opposing wide receivers. Stephon Diggs scored 29 fantasy points in week 1 off of 9 pass targets. He's going to be about 56% owned, projected at 18.8 fantasy points here in week 2. He's 11,400 DraftKings salary. So another expensive player on the slate, but I think it's worth trying to get him into at least one of your lineups if you can do that. So I like Stephon Diggs here versus the Tennessee Titans. Before I continue with the picks, I'm excited today because we added a new contest for everyone watching. If you want to enter the drawing for $25 PayPal, all you need to do is like this video, hit that subscribe button, and make a quick comment below to be entered into the drawing. We'll reply to a random comment and let you know that you won, and we'll send you $25 PayPal. So it's that easy, and we pick a new winner every Saturday and announce them in our video. So get your comment in now so I can add another entry for you. Okay, now if you're looking to save some salary at this position, take a look at Jamison Crowder from the Buffalo Bills. And he scored 6 fantasy points in week 1 off of 4 pass targets. He's going to be about 16% owned. He's 5,200 DraftKings salary. So I like Jamison Crowder here versus the Tennessee Titans. But the wide receiver I'm looking to roster here in most of my lineups tonight, although he did not have a good week 1, I like Robert Woods from the Tennessee Titans. The Buffalo Bills are middle of the pack defending opposing wide receivers. Robert Woods only scored 2 fantasy points off of 2 targets in week 1, but he was on the field for 71% of the snaps. He's going to be about 26% owned, projected at 10.1 fantasy points here tonight, but he could absolutely go for 15 to 20 plus fantasy points. And he's only 6,600 DraftKings salary. In a game where Vegas thinks the Titans are going to be trailing by 10, he could get quite a few pass targets here tonight. So I like Robert Woods here versus the Buffalo Bills. Okay, moving on to the tight end position. A couple of tight ends to look at. Take a look at Austin Hooper from the Tennessee Titans. He only scored 2 fantasy points in week 1 off of 2 pass targets. He was on the field for 62% of the snaps, going to be about 15% owned, and he's only 3,800 DraftKings salary, so you're going to have to save some salary somewhere, and I do think the tight end position is the place to do it. So I like Austin Hooper here versus the Buffalo Bills. Now, the other guy you can look at from the Tennessee Titans is Geoff Swaim. He is only 3,000 DraftKings salary, and he scored 5 fantasy points off of 4 pass targets in week 1, was on the field for 69% of the snaps. He's going to be about 9% owned, so I like Geoff Swaim here versus the Buffalo Bills. Okay guys, we'll do lineups for both of these Showdown slates at the end of this video, but now let's take a look at the players from the Minnesota-Philadelphia game. So let's take a look at the quarterback position. So I like Jalen Hurts from the Philadelphia Eagles, and the Minnesota Vikings do have a good defense overall. They've been good versus opposing quarterbacks, but Jalen Hurts scored 25 fantasy points in week 1, and he got 17 rush attempts in that game. So it makes him an attractive fantasy football play here tonight. Really hard to get off of those 17 rush attempts. He's projected at 22.5 fantasy points here tonight. He's 11,600 DraftKings salary. Vegas thinks there's going to be 50.5 points scored in this game, with the Eagles favored by 2.5. So I like Jalen Hurts here versus the Minnesota Vikings. Now, for the Minnesota Vikings, you can take a look at Kirk Cousins. He actually has a better matchup here. The Philadelphia Eagles are the fourth worst defense overall. They're middle of the pack defending opposing quarterbacks. He scored 19 fantasy points in week 1, and he's only $9,800 DraftKings salary. Although I do prefer to pay up for Jalen Hurts, I still like Kirk Cousins here versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Okay, let's take a look at the running back position. So, stud on the slate, you got Dalvin Cook from the Minnesota Vikings playing the Philadelphia Eagles, who have the fourth worst defense overall. They give up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Dalvin Cook, he scored 14 fantasy points in week 1 off of 20 rush attempts and 5 pass targets. He's projected at 17.4 fantasy points here tonight. He's 11,000 DraftKings salary. So I like Dalvin Cook here versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all the tools for NFL. NBA is right around the corner. This is a great time to get in and try everything for 1 month. The tools are all about saving research time. You can see the last 3 games, the fantasy points per game, the targets they got per game, so you can see how involved they are in the offense, the rushes they got per game. Seeing all this stuff on one screen helps you save time and make better picks. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups. Now, I also like Miles Sanders from the Philadelphia Eagles, and the Minnesota Vikings, although they have a good defense overall, they give up the 5th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. So this should be a good matchup for Miles Sanders as well. And he scored 19 fantasy points in week 1 off of 13 rush attempts and 2 pass targets, projected at 12.5 fantasy points here tonight. But he's only 8,000 DraftKings salary. So it's a guy that's got 20 plus fantasy point upside, and he's 3,000 less than Dalvin Cook. So I like Miles Sanders here versus the Minnesota Vikings. Okay, moving on to the wide receiver position, the super stud on the slate, and I actually think he's a little overpriced here, guys. Take a look at Justin Jefferson from the Minnesota Vikings. Now, the Philadelphia Eagles, they do give up the 7th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers, and Justin Jefferson scored 42 fantasy points in week 1 off of 11 pass targets. He was on the field for 92% of the snaps. He's projected at 24.8 fantasy points here tonight, but he is 13,000 DraftKings salary, so going to be hard to fit him in, especially as your captain. Now, if he goes off for another 30 plus fantasy points, then that'll be money well spent, but there is a big chance here that he does not live up to his week 1 performance and can't hit value for his salary. So I like Justin Jefferson, but I'm going to be a little cautious here as he is pretty expensive. Now, the stud for the Philadelphia Eagles is A.J. Brown, and he's got a tough matchup here, but he scored 29 fantasy points in week 1 off of 13 pass targets. He was on the field for 87% of the snaps, projected at 17 fantasy points here tonight. He's 10,400 DraftKings salary, so I like A.J. Brown here versus the Minnesota Vikings. But if you're looking to save some salary at the wide receiver position, gonna have to save some salary somewhere. I think the best wide receiver for the price tag is Adam Thielen from the Minnesota Vikings. Now, he only scored 7 fantasy points in week 1 off of 4 pass targets, but he's projected at 12.6 fantasy points here tonight, and he's 7,200 DraftKings salary. So much more reasonable price to fit into your lineup. So I like Adam Thielen here versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, if you're looking for a salary saver pick here, take a look at KJ Osborne from the Minnesota Vikings. KJ Osborne scored 4 fantasy points off of 4 pass targets in week 1. He's projected at 8.6 fantasy points here tonight. But I like this pick because he's only 4,600 DraftKings salary. So he'll be able to give your lineup some salary relief so you can fit in those other studs. He was on the field for 68% of the snaps. Oh, Adam Thielen was on the field for 95% of the snaps. He leads the snap count out of all these wide receivers. So that's why I like Adam Thielen. But I also like KJ Osborne here versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Okay, moving on to the tight end position. I like Dallas Goedert from the Philadelphia Eagles, and the Minnesota Vikings are middle of the pack defending opposing tight ends. Dallas Goedert scored 9 fantasy points off of 4 pass targets in week 1. I like this pick because he was on the field for 92% of the snaps. He's projected at 10.9 fantasy points here in week 2 or here tonight. And Dallas Goedert is 5,800 DraftKings salary. So I like Dallas Goedert here versus the Minnesota Vikings. Now, if you're looking for a tight end or a player in your lineup as a low salary player, a guy that's going to get some opportunities or should get some opportunities here tonight, take a look at Johnny Munt from the Minnesota Vikings playing the Philadelphia Eagles. Johnny Munt scored 5 fantasy points off of 3 pass targets in week 1, and he was on the field for 65% of the snaps. Compare that to Irv Smith Jr., only on the field for 31% of the snaps, and he did outperform Irv Smith Jr., and he's more than half the price here. He's only 2,000 DraftKings salary, where Irv Smith Jr. is 4,400 DraftKings salary. Irv Smith Jr. scored 0 fantasy points, got only 2 pass targets. So between the two of these guys, I would go for the salary saving option here. So I like Johnny Munt here versus the Philadelphia Eagles. If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NFL slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.